Hello and welcome to Storytelling Live. This is a test to see if... I wanted to put this on my... Tra-la-la-la-la. Tra-la-la-la-la. See if we can... Hello. Hello. Why, hello there. Well, anyway, I've got my costume here. You know, the got the look at the all right, can you see that? Not sure if you can actually see. This is like a little Bel Air. This is not Victorian attire, neither is the cocktail, but I have a nice little waistcoat or the a little vest. And I'm happy to see you back. Thank you for being here. And I've got stuff, and we will be talking about ghosts, and we will be talking about Lord Halifax's, why Lord Halifax collected ghost stories, and what is this Victorian tradition of telling ghost stories to the children? Why would you, on Christmas Eve? Hey, have a happy Christmas Eve, kids. Take a ghost story. You know, wow, thanks, Dad. I'm scared witless. I'm not going to talk to anybody. Actually, that's a part of it. I'll talk about that soon. I need to get my mystery beverage. Welcome with me tonight. Forever Green, my good friends. We've been having a lot of fun lately, and it's serious stuff. And we're gonna launch their first single. And I think they have singles, but it's just another single coming up. I've got to turn off my phone, quit everything, and get fully ready. This is pretty much just a test, but I'm happy to see you back. And I'll see you in 2 seconds. And did you get your sweet beverage? Hopefully you got your favorite beverage, hot or cold, whatever it would be. This is to you, this is a mystery, but here's to you, and here's to the solstice, and here is to the seasons, and all of the seasons that everyone celebrates in their own way. Everyone gets to celebrate in their own way, and I hope that there's one thing that we do all share, and that is, well, half of us on the planet, that is that the weather's cold and the time is short. The feelings of angst, hopefully now it's all behind you. So it's dark, it's cold, and you're angsty, and you're running around, and that person just said this and that to you. You had a deadline, you missed a deadline, right? All that ends right now, right here. We're just going to sit back and listen to dusty old Victorian ghost stories because we like to have fun together, right? Oh man, that is some delicious secret beverage. Haven't had secret beverage in a while. Missing these days. Oops, camera's down there. Been missing these days. Miss you all out there. I miss our days live together, you know. I'm going to figure out how to do that again. And I will, someone said, well, you ought to do Zoom, you know, but I've always wanted to do it in front of a live audience too. Why not talk a little bit beforehand? And why not get together and then just listen to, dusty old stories? They're not dusty. I read them because they're still pertinent today, and when they're outdated, they're gloriously outdated, wonderfully outdated. Like, why do ghost stories of Victorian times happen in large castles and big halls and big places with rich people? And I thank God the rich are haunted. Give them a little trouble for all their troubles. Right? And so we are here to celebrate together. And I've got my party hat. And tonight we will be, oh, you know, I should stop. I'll be right back. Is there anything I forgot to say? Oh, well, we're, just before I take off, haunted houses, ghostly rooms, a little Ouija board, or the planchette as they used to call it, and the man in the iron cage. Man in the iron mask, no. Man in the iron cage, yes. This apparently is a true story, because Halifax only recorded the true. We'll talk about that in a couple minutes. I just need to check the... Did I tell you I did this twice already? And the computer didn't record it at all. The file was corrupt. It just won't work in the old way anymore, and I'm just nervous now. So I'm going to check the file to make sure I don't have to do this twice, because I'm going to read. And when I read, baby, I don't want to stop. So just let me check 2 seconds. Great, seems to be working. Pardon my giant hands. Rawr. I'm just preparing this thing here on my computer. And so, Christmas Eve, we're all Victorian now. We're like these richish Victorians. Yes. Checking 1. Hello? Check 1. Yes. Okay. Oh man. We got a great show for you tonight. I'm gonna read from Lord Halifax's ghost book. And why did Lord Halifax, and then we're gonna listen to we're gonna sing along with Forever Green, Christy and Kara Brown, and we've got some cool songs for you. So you're gonna love that. Hi, welcome to Upstairs. I'm here with Christy.
Hi.
And Kara.
Howdy do. Howdy do.
We're gonna sing a couple songs, and they are gonna sing, and I will croak. But so we're gonna, you know, Cosby, Epstein, you know,
Elon
what's
Musk?
Elon Musk. Did he do that too?
I'm not sure. We don't know what you're talking about with Cosby.
Oh man. Well, we're talking about men womanizing women and like, hey man, well here's a roofie in your drink, and like, hey, why don't you stay? I've fixed you a special cocktail.
There's a roofie in my drink? So
yeah,
this song could be seen that way, that we're going to present, but it could also just be seen as a sign of the times at the time.
And absolutely, we're gonna have fun singing a little wintry song that gives some people chills, and it has been canceled, but we're uncanceling it just for this evening for your viewing and listening pleasure, because we have a thing worked out. Kind of, they're better at it, and you're gonna see that, right? And as long as you got your, maybe make yourself a hot toddy, or make yourself a hot chocolate, or make yourself a hot vanilla, or make yourself a, you know, get something that you want to sip on while we listen to this. And so we're talking about Lord Halifax's ghost book, and why ever would he collect ghost stories. They were all the rage, and I believe that the Victorian fascination with the afterlife began in like 1830s, was it? With the Fox sisters in America, and then they began to it was called table rapping. They were rappers. Okay, these guys were the first rappers, or these ladies, these women, young women. They were the daughters, the young daughters, they were like maybe early teens, and they could get ghosts to knock underneath the table, and they could communicate. 1 knock for yes, 2 knocks for two. And then they were taking the show on the road. They were doing knocks on the walls. Then they would just conduct these seances. So seances people began to sell seances. That was that was that was a hot commodity back then. And of course, fascination with the dead. Of course, cobwebs and fish scales in architecture, right? And cobweb windows, stuff like that. You know all about it. But why this fascination with death then? I believe it began with the Fox sisters who were communicating, and people wanted to get, well, Civil War was very bloody. People wanted to get in touch with their family. Soldiers lost. World War One was bloody. That was later, but 1830s, 1890s, 1900s kind of stopped with the industrial age coming up. People got tired, got weird, got turned into ghost photographs and then fairy photographs. And Conan Doyle tried to convince all of us about spiritualism and the truth of spiritualism and the validity of fairies as well. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe people still get into it. I'm sorry if you do, and I don't mean to. Well, I mean, fairies, right, and ghosts do exist on a certain level, and not the way one would expect them to. But in, right, we could say that. I just did. So, hopefully that won't get me in trouble with anyone. Basically, we're here to have a good time and think about why the adults collected the children around the Christmas tree on Christmas Eve and told them scary stories. They would be scared witless. They'd be guided back up to bed by the maids or the parents or the butlers or whoever. They would be tucked in and left, and the Christmas party of the adults would be allowed to continue into the night. So, if the children were to be awakened by banging from the attic, right, they would stay in bed. They wouldn't be apt to go up and explore. They would know the ghost story already. I don't need to go see it for myself. I'm going to stay here. I just got scared witless. I'll stay here, right? Staying in bed, stay in my bedroom. It's perfect child control, right? And then if there's moaning in the walls where no one should be sleeping, where no one is, it should be an empty room, but there are sounds coming from that room. Well, that's trouble, isn't it? So you stay where you're at, right? That's what I say. Don't bother looking around, kids. You stay in bed. You know the story. You don't need to see it for yourself. You know what the story is, right? I'm trying to remember something else I wanted to tell you, and I'm forgetting it. So Lord Halifax collected these there were true stories with personal attestation where he knew personally where he knew the person who related it to him, who wrote him a letter. Also, throughout Victorian literature, letters to signed and dated, this format is prevalent throughout Victorian. This is the testimony. This is the signed and dated testimony. It adds veritas. It adds gravitas to what I've just said because there's a date on it, right? It's a letter to you, man. Okay, so these are letters that were sent to Lord Halifax, or notes that he took himself and added to this notebook. And when he passed in about the 30s, I think his son or grandson or somebody collected the stories and made a book called Lord Halifax's Ghost Book. Now you pretty much know everything there is to know. And so when I do the little explanations that come before the story, you'll get into it. You'll understand it better. Oh, it's wild. If you hear cars on the road, it's because there are cars on the road and they're passing by. If we were in Victorian days, you would hear the horses clopping. Maybe I should put that kind of sound in later on. Story number 1, The Strangling Woman. This story of a haunted room in Thurston Old Hall, Cheshire, is the first in the book and is in Lord Halifax's own writing. To his dying day, my old friend Reginald Easton, the artist, persisted in the truth of the following story. If I lapse into a fake and wavering English accent, do not begrudge me. I mean, I could work to keep it off. I mean, to not, do it, but it's just written in such a Englishy way, So you should read some of the stuff out loud yourself. You'll notice yourself kind of tut, sir, or whatever. I'm not even that good at it. To his dying day. Okay. One day he had a letter from some people in the name of Cobb living at Thurston Old Hall, Cheshire, asking him if he would pay them a visit and do miniatures of the children. Having accepted the commission, he travelled down to Cheshire to carry it out. The Cobbs, he found, were charming people, and the children were pretty. The house was so full of company that only one room was available for the accommodation of the artist. Mr. Easton noticed a mysterious sort of muttering passing between host and hostess, of which he caught the words, "It cannot be helped. There is no other." He took it that these words referred to the apartment, which was being given him, and naturally put a rather unfavorable construction on them, thinking that possibly the room might be damp. This, however, he was assured was not the case. Shortly after dinner, the household retired to bed. It seemed to Mr. Easton that he had scarcely fallen asleep when he was awakened by a strange intruder in the shape of an elderly lady who stood at the foot of his bed in the full light of the moon. She appeared to be wringing her hands, and her eyes were cast down as though she was searching for something on the floor. Thinking that she was one of the guests who had come to the wrong room, Mr. Easton sat up in his bed and said, "I beg your pardon, madame, but you've mistaken your room." His visitor made no reply, but to his great surprise, disappeared. "If there ever was a ghost, that is one," said Mr. Easton to himself. Next morning at breakfast, the mystery of the conversation of the previous night between his host and hostess was cleared up, when in reply to the usual hope that he had slept well, he gave an account of his midnight visitor. "Yes," said Mrs. Cobb, "we never use that room if we can avoid doing so, for our friends are sometimes terrified by the apparition of a dreadful woman who committed a murder in that room. She's no ancestor of ours, but came into possession of this property by the murder of the heir to it. He was a child, who was the only obstacle to her inheriting the estate. She sent the child's nurse away on a fictitious errand, and, during her absence, he strangled the heir. But did it so skillfully that no traces of foul play were discernible. Nothing would have been known of the crime if she had not confessed it on her deathbed. The property was then sold, and Mr. Cobb's grandfather bought it." "Do you think she'll appear again?" inquired the artist. "Certainly she will, and at about the same time," was the reply. At Mr. Easton's request, he was furnished with a lamp, the light of which was kept as low as possible. And so, on the second night, he lay down in bed with sketchy materials by his side, determined to keep awake. Presently, the ghost appeared, conducted herself exactly as on the previous night. She must, if capable of surprise, have received a shock, when Easton sat up in bed and said, "I beg your pardon, madame. I'm an artist. Would you allow me to make a sketch of you? I shall then convince skeptics of the truth of—" But at that moment, the old lady vanished as before. Mr. Easton, however, persevered with his portrait, the nightly appearance of the murderess, enabling a retentive memory to produce a fair resemblance of what he solemnly declared to me he had seen on each of the 7 nights during which he occupied the haunted room. Mr. Easton lent his drawing of the ghost to Lord Halifax, who copied it. His copy is in the ghost book. Yes, we're back. So, is multiple gigabytes. I have no idea if my computer is going to run afoul once more. Speaking of afoul, I hope you guys are having a wonderful Christmas goose, right? I've heard Canadian goose is actually tender to eat as long as you have to do something particular to it. You know, oh, salt brine. Salt brine. If you just cut into it and just open up, well, first of all, he's going to be pissed at you for cutting into it, right? You know, anyway. I'm just teasing anyway. Come on, man. Here I am again. Copy of a letter dated July 10th, 1917. Lord Halifax himself. He's going to read the stories so that he can cavort with the Christmas guests, right? So he's handing the alcohol out and dosing it very specifically to specific guests to make sure that they are. I'm not going to go there. Things can happen. People who haven't seen each other in a long time, finally you're in a beautiful chateau together, right? Who knows what's going to happen? Things. Ghosts, of course. Ghosts happen. Here I am again. Copy of a letter dated July 10th, 1917, from Charles the G. somebody to Esquire to Lord Halifax. Dear Lord Halifax, I send you herewith my plain, unvarnished tale, according to your kind request. I may say in confidence that the house was at Deal, but I would rather that my name and the name of my house should not be mentioned in case you care at any time to give publicity to the story. The only tales dealing with ghostly phenomena which seem to me to be of any value are those relating to first-hand experiences. All others are so embroidered that the truth of them is merely a matter of surmise. My experience was horrible, and so much so that I have vowed never to have anything to do with spiritualism in any shape or form. I want no more materializations, which seem to be the goal of all ardent spiritualists. The house in question is an old Georgian house in Deal. It was bought about 1740, and Nelson addressed many of his letters to Lady Hamilton from there, calling it the Deer House. My host and I had been yachting together, and on our arrival from the sea, unexpectedly found the house full of relations who had come to stay. Well, pooh-pooh. A bed was obtained for me in a dressing room. On a previous visit, I had heard that the house was haunted and that all the daughters had seen the figures of someone they had called their great-grandmother gliding about. The servants had been terrified, and in consequence of what they saw had refused to stay. I had forgotten this. I was in rude health after my Channel cruise, and nothing ghostly was discussed before I retired to bed. In the middle of the night, I awoke, feeling that something uncanny was about me. Suddenly, there appeared at my bedside the phantom of either an old man or an old woman, of dreadful aspect, who was bending over me. That I was wide awake is beyond all question. I at once became cataleptic, unable to move hand or foot, for I could only gaze at this monstrosity, vowing mentally that if I ever recovered from this horrible experience, I would never dabble in table turning, planchette, etc. again. For here was real materialization, and the reality was too terrifying for description. Next morning, I told my host privately of what had occurred. He said he was not in the least surprised, as everybody living in the house except himself had at one time or another seen something of the sort. 20 years passed, and I had almost forgotten the incident. I had frequently revisited the house and had seen nothing. Then one day I was again invited and found my host alone. We played billiards together and retired rather late. I was suffering from toothache and getting on to bed, and on getting into bed, was utterly unable to sleep The room was in a different part of the house from the dressing room in which I had slept on the occasion of my first visit, and suddenly, although it was early summer, I began to feel very cold. I seemed literally to freeze from my feet upwards, and although I put on more clothes, the cold rapidly increased until I imagined that my heart must be failing and that this was death. All at once, a voice, unheard physically, appeared to be saying over and over again to me, "Here I am again. Here I am, after 20 years once more," in an exact repetition of my feeling 20 years before. I was conscious of the presence of something unseen in the room. I pulled myself together and said to myself, "This time I will see this thing through and definitely prove whether my former experience was an hallucination and whether there really is, such a thing as a ghost." I'm wide awake, beyond all possibility of doubt, and only too conscious of a raging toothache. The thing again spoke to me mentally. "Look round, look round." I now had that unaccountable feeling of horror, which all accounts of such manifestations agree in declaring are produced on such occasions. Turning round, I saw in the corner of the room facing me a curious column of light, revolving spirally like a whirlwind of dust on a windy day. It was white, and as I gazed, it slowly drew near to me. "Here I am again." The thing kept repeating. I stretched out my hand for the matches at my bedside. As the thing got gradually closer and closer to me, it rapidly began to take human shape. Under my eyes and within my grasp, it assumed that very figure I had seen 20 years before, and there was no doubt whatever about this. Having reached the limit of my endurance, I shouted out, "Who's that?" No answer coming, I hurriedly lit a match and a candle. Next morning, I told my host what had befallen me. He was greatly interested and related 2 weird occurrences in the house, both of which had taken place when a servant came up to say that a friend had called to see him. He ran hurriedly downstairs, and as he turned on the landing for the next flight, he saw the figure of a man rushing upstairs. My friend, unable to stop himself, put up his hands to avert a collision and went right through his figure. The second occasion had been when one evening an officer of Marines came by to play billiards with him and brought his dog, which lay down under the table. Suddenly the dog sprang up and began barking furiously at something invisible in the corner. It went on barking until its mouth foamed and its hair stood on end. They endeavored in vain to calm it. From under the table it kept making violent rushes at the corner, then retreating again. Neither my friend nor the officer who was visiting saw anything. That's it for that story. Anyway, let's have a musical break. And then, no, we're just uncanceling it for this time, and then we'll cancel it right back up after we're done singing.
Okay.
Right?
Are we gonna have a drink?
Oh, we have something special
I still
for
have-
the Tiny Tim and his family to suck on after the Christmas goose. Yes, it's bubbly.
That's good. That's good.
Oops.
Thank you.
It's a little bubbly.
Oh, why, thank you, sir.
And there's absolutely no brand to this, and I'm not advertising any kind of brand. And that just went right into the end of the previous.
Yeah.
This is. Cheers.
Cheers.
Happy Christmas, happy solstice to
holidays.
everyone. Thank you both for being
Let's
here
do this.
with me tonight. with us
Thank
tonight.
you so much for joining us. I hope you have as much fun as we do.
Probably not, but I think they can hold their breath.
All right. This is one of my favorite Christmas songs.
Oh, I'm gonna hate it.
I really can't stay.
Baby, it's cold outside.
I got to go away.
Baby, it's cold outside.
This evening has been
So happy that you
so very
dropped in.
nice.
Hell, hold your hands. Hey, they just look eyes.
My mother will start to worry.
Baby, what's your
My father
hurry?
will be pacing the floor.
Listen to the fireplace
So
roar.
really, I'd better scurry.
Beautiful, just don't hurry.
Maybe just a half a drink more.
I'll put some records on while I
My
pour.
neighbors might think.
Baby, it's cold out there.
Say what's in this drink.
No cabs be had out there.
I wish I knew how.
Your eyes are like starlight
to
now.
break the spell.
I'll take your hat, but your hair looks
I ought to
swell.
say no, no, no,
Mind if I'm
sir.
moving
First
closer?
I'm gonna say that I tried.
What's the sense of hurting my
I
pride?
really can't stay.
Baby, don't hold out.
Baby, it's cold outside.
You're very pushy, don't you know?
I like to think of it as opportunistic.
I simply must go.
Baby, it's cold outside.
The answer is no.
But baby, it's cold outside.
The welcome has been
How lucky that you
so
dropped
nice and
in.
warm.
Look out the window at that
My
storm.
sister will be suspicious.
Gosh, your lips look delicious.
My brother will be there at the door.
Waves upon a tropical
My
shore.
maiden dance mind is vicious.
Gosh, your lips are delicious.
Maybe just a cigarette more.
I've never seen such a blizzard before.
Got to get home.
Baby, you'll freeze out there.
Say, lend me your coat.
Baby, it's up to your knees out there.
You've really been grand.
When I touch your hand,
don't you see?
well, how can you do this thing to me?
There's bound to be talk tomorrow.
Think of my lifelong sorrow.
At least there will be plenty implied.
If you got pneumonia and
I
died,
really can't stay.
baby, it's
cold. Baby, it's cold outside.
Chin.
I think we'll stay.
That was cool, right? We had fun. Anyway, welcome back. And we'll have some more Forever Green later on or something like that. And maybe you've already seen them. And I might put them, they might appear all the way through this program. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I want to tell you briefly that I once lived in Lille. And that's a little bright, isn't it? That's going to make a difference on my face, isn't it? Yes, okay. So, is that better? That's good. I just wanted to tell you that I once lived in Lille, and Lille, France. Lille, Lille, is a town in France. And so this story, I've never heard of this place before, but apparently it exists. And I went to learn French, and I didn't really know any French beforehand, but I for some reason in the space of about wow, man, was that 4 months? It was like, it seemed like an eternity. Maybe it was longer than 4 months. Maybe in the space of about 6 months or something like that, I became extremely fluent, and I gained the accent of the north of France. And later I moved to Paris and took the Parisian accent. And there's a difference between the two. Another thing I'd like to mention is, oh yes, I get house dreams. Have you ever had recurring house dreams? Do you ever go back to the same house? That's weird, isn't it? It's fun. It's fun. I mean, I don't know if you have house nightmares, but mine are also kind of nightmarish. And, or like I remember waking up. Wow. I mean, I've had it. I remember waking up inside a house that has like a window right at the level of the soil and watching. There's grass that goes out to a huge field or something, and then maybe there's a road far out. It's wild. And then there's another one where I am the owner of a building, and I'm checking out floors, higher floors, and somebody has cleared out the walls so that there are no walls. It's just like a huge bank of windows with couches. It's a giant living room for a bunch of people, and in the core of the building, people have made sort of shacks, and they're living inside toward the core, and then outside, or maybe it's just toward the front. Anyway, it's a giant living room where everybody collects and they can talk. I don't know if that's real or not. And then off to the side is another apartment that I own. It's a door that goes off. Anyway, so bizarre. And hopefully you have fun with these kinds of dreams as well. But anyway, there is something, to me, eerie or haunting about buildings or houses that are just sometimes too large. Just, if it's too large, it becomes a menace, doesn't it? I think maybe there's something sweet and cozy about a small house. Maybe. The Man in the Iron Cage. This story was a great favorite with Lord Halifax. It is preceded by the following note. I certify this to be a correct copy of the account written by Mr. Pennyman of the ghost that haunted at the hotel at Lille. Signed Mr. Barrington. You expressed a wish to know what credit might be given to a story, a garbled version of which, after a lapse between 30 and 40 years, appeared recently as a true ghost story. I will accordingly state the facts as they were recalled to me about a year ago by an old friend of mine, a daughter of the late Sir W.A. Court. She sent me the album in which the story had been written, requesting me to read it and let her know if there was any truth in it. She had been intimate with my mother and the whole family, and since she had never heard the matter mentioned, she could not believe that it was true. I read the story with the greatest surprise. Clearly, it could not have been written by any member of the family alive at the time, or indeed by anyone who was at all intimate with us. It was full of mistakes as to names, yet in some parts it was so near the truth that I was frankly puzzled. So many years had elapsed, and so much had happened to drive the incident from the mind, that I had some trouble in recalling exactly what had occurred. However, I succeeded in doing so, and am now able to answer your enquiries. My father and mother, with myself, my sisters, and one of my brothers, the other, Harry, was too young for the university, was nearly the head boy of Westminster. He went abroad in the late autumn of 1865 or 1866, and we children were supposed to be learning French. And after we had visited 2 or 3 towns in France, our parents decided to make a rather longer stay at Lille. Besides finding the teaching particularly good there, we had letters of introduction to some of the leading families of the neighborhood. The first lodging we had was very uncomfortable, and my father soon began to look around for a house. In due course, he discovered a very large and well-built residence, to which we took a great fancy, and we were told that we could rent it at what was a remarkably low figure, even for that part of the world. Accordingly, we took the house and moved into it without delay. About 3 weeks later, I went with my mother to the bankers with a letter of credit which we cashed. As the money was paid in large 6-franc pieces, we could not take it with us. The banker offered to send his clerk. He asked our address, and when we told him that our house was the place de Lion d'Or, he looked surprised. There was, he said, nothing there that would suit our family except for, indeed, a house that had been long unlet on account of a revenant that walked about it. He said quite seriously, and he said that quite seriously and in a natural tone of voice. My mother and I laughed, but asked the clerk not to mention the revenant to the servants. As we were walking home, my mother remarked in fun, "I suppose, Bessie, that it was the ghost which woke us up by walking about over our heads." I was sleeping in the same room with her, and on 3 or 4 nights we had been awakened by a slow, heavy step overhead, which we thought must be one of the manservants walking about. Our staff consisted of 3 English men, a footman who had been with us for years, a coachman, and a groom. 3 English women, my mother's maid and housekeeper, my own maid, and a nursery maid. All these English servants returned to England with us and never had any idea of leaving us. The other women in the house were French, and so were the butler, the cook, and the footman, and Louis, a boy. Louis, a boy who came home with us a few days after our visit to the bankers, having been again awakened in the night by steps overhead. My mother asked Cresswell, her maid, who was sleeping in the room over us. She replied, "No one, my lady. It is a large empty garret." A week or 10 days later, Cresswell came in one morning after breakfast and told my mother that most of the French servants were talking of leaving, because there was a revenant in the house. "Indeed, my lady," she said, "there is a very strange story about a young man who was heir to this and another house with an estate in the country, and is said to have been confined by an uncle in an iron cage in this house. As he disappeared and was never afterwards seen, they suppose that he was killed here. The uncle left the house in a hurry and afterwards sold it to the father of the man from whom you took it. No one has ever remained in it for so long as we have done, and it has been a long time without a tenant." "And do you believe this, Cresswell?" asked my mother. "Well," she replied, "the iron cage is in the garret over your head, my lady, and I wish you would all come up and see it." At this moment, a friend of ours, an old officer with the Cross of St. Louis, arrived to call on us. We told him the story with some amusement and asked him to accompany us upstairs to see the cage. We found ourselves in a long, large garret with bare brick walls. It was quite empty, except that, in the further corner, there was an iron cage attached to the wall. It recalled to us the kind of cage in which wild beasts are kept. Only it was higher. It was about 4 feet square and 8 feet high, and there was an iron ring in the wall at the back to which was attached an old rusty chain with a collar. We really began to feel creepy at the idea that any human being could have been kept in such an unpleasant space, and our French friend was as horrified as we were. All the same, we were quite certain that the footsteps we had heard in the night were part of a plan to keep the house untenanted. And we were rather uncomfortable at the thought that there was a private way in, of which we knew nothing. We therefore decided to look about us for something else, but to stay in our present quarters until we were successful in finding it. About 10 days after our visit to the garret, Cresswell came to dress my mother in the morning, looking so pale and ill that we asked her what was the matter. "Indeed, my lady," she said, "we have been frightened to death. Neither Mrs. Marsh, my maid, nor I can sleep again in the room we are now in." "Well, said my mother, "you may come and sleep in the little spare room next to ours, but what has frightened you?" "Someone, my lady," she said, "went through our room last night. We both saw the figure, but hid under the bedclothes and lay in a dreadful fright until the morning." I burst out laughing. But Cresswell began to cry. And when I saw that she was really upset, I tried to comfort her. I told her we had heard of a very good house and would soon move into it. Meanwhile, they could sleep in the room next to ours. The room in which they had been so frightened had a door recessed from the first landing on a very wide staircase, leading to the passage onto which the best rooms opened. The door of my mother's room faced the staircase. In Cresswell's old room, there was a second door, which led to the back stairs, making it a kind of passage. A few nights after the change of rooms, my mother asked Charles and me to fetch from her bedroom her long embroidery frame, so that she might get her work ready for the morning. Although it was after supper, and quite dark, we did not take the candle, as there was a lamp at the bottom of the staircase. We thought we could find the frame by leaving open the door of my mother's room. When we reached the foot of the stairs, we saw a tall, thin figure in a powdering gown and wearing hair down the back, going up the stairs in front of us. And we both thought it was Hannah, and called out, "It won't do, Hannah! You can't frighten us!" At these words, the figure turned into the recess, and when, in passing it, we saw nobody there, we concluded that she had gone through Cresswell's old room and down the back staircase. When we returned with the frame, we told my mother of Hannah's trick. She said, "That's very odd. Before you came in from your walk, Hannah went to bed with a headache." We went at once to Hannah's room, where we found Alice at work, and she told us that Hannah had been sound asleep for more than an hour. A little later, on our way to bed, we saw Cresswell. When we told her of our mistake, she turned quite white and exclaimed, "That's exactly the figure I saw." About this time, my brother Harry came to spend 10 days with us. He was sleeping up another staircase at the far end of the house. And one morning, when he came down to breakfast, he asked my mother quite angrily if she had thought he was drunk the night before and could not put out his candle, since she had sent some of those French rascals to watch him. He added, "I jumped up and opened my door by the moon. Through the skylight, I saw a fellow in his loose gown at the bottom of the stairs. If I had anything on, I would have been after him and taught him to come spying on me." And my mother assured him that she had not sent anyone. That very day we had arranged to take a delightful house with a charming garden belonging to a young nobleman who was going to Italy for a few years. An evening or two before we moved in, a Mr. and Mrs. Atkins and their son, who lived 3 or 4 miles from Lille, came on horseback to call on us. We told them how frightened our servants had been, and how disagreeable it was to be in a house which a person might enter unknown to us. We told them that no one now would sleep in the room in which Cresswell and my maid had seen the revenant. Mrs. Atkins laughed and said that with my mother's permission she would very much like to sleep there, and that with her terrier to keep her company she would not be in the least afraid. On my mother replying that she had no objection, Mr. Atkins rode home with the boy to fetch Mrs. Atkins' things before the gates were shut. In the morning, Mrs. Atkins looked ill and did not appear to have slept much. When we asked her if she had been frightened, she declared that she had been roused from sound sleep by someone moving about her room. The dog did not stir, although he generally flew at an intruder, but by the lamp in the chimney she distinctly saw a figure. She said that she had tried to set the dog at it, but our belief was that she was much too frightened, and we were greatly entertained when Mr. Atkins arrived to take her home, and to her indignation he said in his droll way, "Perhaps you dreamt it all." And after they had gone, my mother said, as she had often done, "I cannot for an instant fancy it is a ghost. but I most sincerely hope that I shall get out of the house without seeing what seems to frighten people so much. I know that to see any person in my room at night would alarm me dreadfully. 3 days before our move into the new house, I had been for a long ride and went to bed tired. It was hot, and the curtains of our bed were undrawn on my side, and at the foot I was sleeping soundly when I was awakened. Though by what I could not say, we were so accustomed to the footsteps overhead that by this time they never awakened either my mother or myself. I kept a light always burning in the room, and by it I saw a tall, thin figure in a long gown. One arm rested upon the chest of drawers that stood between the window and the door. The face was turned towards me. It was long and thin and pale, the face of a young man, with a melancholy look on it which I shall never forget. I was certainly very frightened, but my worst fear was that my mother would wake. Fortunately, she seemed to be in a sound sleep. At that moment, the clock on the stairs struck 4, and I lay for nearly an hour before daring to look again toward the chest. When at last I did so, I could see nothing, though I never heard the door open or shut or any other noise. I did not close my eyes for the rest of the night, and when Creswell came, as usual, I called out, "I need not get up to let you in, for you must have forgotten to put the key upon the chest of drawers last night." She said she had not forgotten, and to my surprise, when I got up, I found the key in the usual place. When I told my mother she was most grateful that I had not wakened her, and insisted that we should not run the risk of spending another night in the house. So directly we had breakfast, and we set about moving all our things so that we were able to sleep in our new quarters. Before we left, Creswell and I examined every part of our room, but without discovering any secret way of entering. In the disturbances that followed in France, and various troubles of our own, we almost forgot about our revenant. On one winter evening, however, my mother made me tell the story to Mrs. Hoare. Now, that's where the story ends. However, there is another pickup here. So, apparently, part of that story appeared in the Cornhill magazine and this is a follow-up to that story. And who's chiming in? No one but the someone of the Baring-Gould family. If you don't know about Sabine Baring-Gould, or I think that's his son, Sabine is a man's name, and he wrote in like the 1840s or something, 1847 or something like that. He wrote this book on lycanthropy and some other amazing books. So lycanthropy, of course, is werewolfism. And he wrote, and you've got to check it out. You can get it on Project Gutenberg because it's 1840s, whatever. It's a public domain now. And you can get yourself a printed version where someone will make money off of printing the book for you, or you can get it yourself. And too bad there is not a facility that allows us to print our own books, right? If we should find something from that age, anyway. So that's Sabine Baring-Gould, and his son is also a very notable author who created the first complete annotated Sherlock Holmes, and that book is a giant 2-volume tome with everything, all the stories and novels exactly as they appeared in the Strand, the stories as they appeared in the Strand, all the illustrations, the novels as they were originally written, and everything that is referred to in all the stories has footnotes. So it's got footnotes and endnotes and commentary and everything that you could possibly. I have I looked it up a few years ago because I was really into this, and actually longer than a few years ago. There used to be, I don't know if it's still there, there used to be a copy at Powell's, in the used bookstore Powell's, multi-levels, amazing used bookstore in Portland, Oregon. There used to be a copy in the rare books room for at least $1,500. I don't know what the price is today, if it's still there. Somebody's probably bought it. But anyway, here is the cheaper version. And basically, just everything is annotated. It's really fun to go through, as a matter of fact. I just invite you to take a look at this. This is the Norton. This is, of course, another great version, because Norton is great, right? But what I'm saying is that this is not the Sabine Baring Gould. Anyway, I mean, the son of Sabine Baring Gould, which I just forgot his name, and you're going to probably tell me what it is right now. But leave it in the comments if you remember his name. Sabine, I believe, is the one who did Lycanthropy. I don't think he's the one who did... well, I don't know anymore. I'm mixed up. It's late at night. Anyway, you check me, please. Please do, because it's great. It's great information. Maybe I'll leave a note about it in the footnotes. I mean, in the comments section on the video. I could do that. So anyway, this is a narrative which appeared in the Cornhill magazine from the pen of the revered, or the Reverend S. Baring Gould, the well-known author, who we now know. He subsequently wrote to Lord Halifax enclosing the following letter which he had received. So, Sabine Baring Gould received this about also the Hotel Leon in Lille. Dear Sir, the November number of the Cornhill magazine. Now, Cornhill was really popular in the Victorian days. Maybe you know about it. Dear Sir, the November number of the Cornhill magazine has only lately come into my hands. I find your story of the man in the iron cage particularly interesting because of an experience I had at the Hotel du Lion d'Or at the Lille some 30 years ago, and I think this may interest you. I venture to write you an account of it. In May 1887, I was traveling with two friends from Boulogne to Brussels. One of my friends, an aged lady, unaccustomed to long railway journeys, became so tired that her sister decided it would be best to stop short at Lille and spend the night there. We arrived toward evening. Knowing nothing of the place and intending to go on the next morning, we asked for the hotel nearest the station, which proved to be an old-fashioned, unpretentious hostelry, the Hotel du Lion d'Or, the Lion of Gold, Lion d'Or. Anyway. We were soon settled in a comfortable suite of rooms on the first floor. The larger bedroom occupied by my friends had two doors, and one opening on the landing to the right of the staircase, the other to a small, narrow anteroom or dressing room, of which the opposite door communicated with my room. At first we thought this was the only entrance to my bedroom, but on examination we found a second door at the further end of my room. This, the landlord said, was usually kept locked, and he did not seem disposed to open it. My friend, however, insisted on the door being unlocked and the key left in our possession. It opened to a small recess off the landing and, as far as I can remember, about opposite to the head of the stairs. And this recess appeared to be used as a housemaid's closet, for it was full of pails and brooms, which we thought explained our host's objection to unlocking the door. My friends retired very early to rest, encouraged by the chambermaid's assurance that they would have a quiet night, as they were the only occupants of that floor. Indeed, we seemed to be the only guests at the hotel. a fact which did not surprise us, as it was early in the season. Since I did not feel at all tired, after wishing my friends good night, I sat down in my room to write some letters home. So engrossed was I in this occupation that the time slipped away quickly. It must have been between 11 and 12 o'clock when I became aware that, although the house had been perfectly quiet, someone was apparently walking up and down in a rather stealthy fashion just outside the door, which opened into the recess. The slow, dragging steps mentioned in your story exactly describes the sound I heard. I paid little heed to it, thinking the steps were those of some belated servant. Suddenly there was a knock at the outer door of my room, and the younger of my friends, whom I had thought to asleep hours before, looked in, anxiously asking if anything was the matter, as she had been awakened by hearing me, as she supposed, walking up and down my room. I assured her that I had not stirred from my chair, and that I too had been surprised by hearing the same noise, which seemed to come from outside my door on the landing. And we opened this door, and with a light, examined the recess, and then the landing, but all was perfectly still, and no one was to be seen, concluding that, although the footsteps seemed to have been so near, the sound must have really proceeded from an upper story. And we relocked the door. My friend returned to her room, and I went to bed, still hearing from time to time, until I fell asleep. That stealthy, dragging step. We left Lille by an early train the next day, and I thought little more of this occurrence. It did not, however, completely pass from my mind, as I mentioned it in recounting my travels on my return home about 2 months later. Very likely I should not have given it another thought had it not happened that a friend of my mother's, who knew her to be interested in ghost stories, gave her a manuscript account almost exactly similar to yours of a haunted house in the Place du Lion d'Or at Lille. It then struck me that probably this was the very house in which I had spent the night, and that the footsteps I had heard were not those of any living denizen of the hotel. I have given you this account, thinking it may help you to identify the house to which your sad story is attached. Believe me to remain, yours faithfully, A.C.T. And that's it. Thank you for listening to another edition of Storytelling Live. Thank you to Christy and Kara Brown, the Forever Green. And I think we're going to go out with a song, and maybe we will, and maybe I'll be back in a bit just to wish you a Merry Christmas and season's greetings and a happy holidays. Just a minute, and I'll be back, and I'll just repeat myself. I'll just say that, but just a minute.
Do you want to do a whole take?
Let's do it.
What do you mean?
Let's
do
do
this.
a whole take?
Let's do the song.
Want to
Let's do this.
You ready?
Let's spank that donkey.
Okay.
Do you want to record this?
Yeah, do you want to say anything about whatever that
Okay, let's-
band was? What's that band? What's that band's name?
Here, I'm gonna press.
No, hey, we're on. We're on.
Oh, okay.
What band are we talking about?
I don't know. What band am I sitting with?
Oh, Forever Green.
We're Forever Green.
Nuh-uh.
Kara and I.
And we would love it if you could find us on Instagram, Forever Green Band, and like us and follow us. Forever Green Duo on Facebook.
We
Oh,
usually
I have
have a
If we get
guitar
one
and
like
a
tonight, we will be
keyboard, and
so happy.
we have a drum machine, and it's usually more than just vocals.
And we are in the studio recording probably what's going to be an album, but we haven't even talked about that yet. With
So far, it's one
at
song. It's a
Youssef,
single.
at Youssef's home, awesome.
That's
little
TF8 Studios
mini
downstairs.
recording studio. TFA.
TF8.
What is
TF8,
that? Oh,
Transfigure Eight.
Transfigure.
Yeah.
Ready?
So this is a request.
Thank you.
Why don't you ting that
Special
glass?
request for a
Yeah, this is
special little lady.
Well,
Yes. Do you have anything to say?
No.
Let's just
She knows.
I'm not gonna put him on the
play the
spot.
song and she'll know.
Oh. Yeah, that's... We don't want her to cry.
No,
Because it'll mean a lot, man.
Aw, that's great.
Well, then we don't want me to cry.
Glad you talked us into it.
Thanks for doing it this way.
Oh yeah, I like
I'm
it.
gonna try.
For sure.
Now, I'm
Way
gonna...
better.
Best
my
version I've
eyes
heard.
are gonna be down here.
Yeah.
But your
well,
ears are gonna be up here, right?
Don't worry, we'll take care of the camera.
Okay, cool. Now I've heard there was a secret chord that David played and pleased the Lord. But you don't really care for music much, now do you?
Like it.
It goes like this, the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall and the major lift, the baffled king composing hallelujah. But your faith was strong, but you needed proof. You saw her bathing on the roof, her beauty and the moonlight overthrew you. She tied you to a kitchen chair. She broke your throne and she cut your hair. And from your lips she drew the hallelujah. Took the name in vain. Don't even know the name. But if I did, oh well, really? What's it to you? There's a blaze of light everywhere. It doesn't matter which you heard, the holy or the broken. Hallelujah. I did my best, it wasn't much. I couldn't feel, so I tried to touch. I've told the truth, I didn't mean to come to fool you. And even though it all went wrong, I'll stand before the Lord of Song with something on my tongue, with nothing on my tongue but hallelujah. Sorry. it's
should
an
have worn
EAD.
boxers.
Boxers?
Well, you lost your G-string.
EADG. Wow, that's a quick one.
There you go. Good one, Kara.
Yeah, you can stop it.
That's
by
the
going
fastest
right
I've
there.
ever done.
Oh, well, you can't beat that with a stick, with a holiday stick, with a candy cane, right? Oh, man. Well, tomorrow's Christmas. Just relax. It doesn't matter. This is not a program to promote drinking or anything like that. Just please find yourself the warm tea beverage or anything that you enjoy. And maybe share that with someone else too. And please, you know, when they say silent night, there is a joy to just having the calm and quiet. And I wish you all a calm and quiet Christmas Eve. And if you hear a ghost out there, tip your hat to them. For me. Good night. Okay, well, you asked for it. Now I can't even look.
Now you're gonna
It's okay.
get
Don't
it.
worry about it.
Anyway, you asked for
It
it.
hurts to be
and now
cool.
we have a good night song for you. It hurts to be good? What?
Sometimes it hurts to be cool,
Oh, okay.
so you have to stare at the bright lights
Well,
and pretend everything's good.
everything's so great
good.
right now.
It's all good.
So good.
Happy holidays, happy New Year. Be chill and please relax tonight. Have a good night.
Strawberry fields have in common with pine? Nothing but the most fantastic old factory kind. Strawberry fields have in common with pine? Nothing but the most fantastic old factory kind. Strawberry fields have in common with pine?
so weird.
He's out.
All right. Good night.
Good night. Thank
Happy
you so
New
much
Year.
for joining us on your Christmas Eve.
We're done.
yeah.
You're done. We're done. This is it. What?
Until
2022
next
is
time.
over.
Oh my God. So what?
Until next time. Walla walla.
Walla
Oh,
walla.
shit,
Walla
we
walla.
had said
You had to
stupid
be
things.
there.
Okay.
What's
You
up?
had to be there.
Never mind.
Oh.
Turn it off. Cut that out.
No, it won't. I won't. It's all in.
Walla, walla,
Love
walla,
ya.
walla.